Welcome back to the Quick Focus Blueprint program, and in today's lesson we are going to hone your focus so you can remember people's names. And I'm going to give you a 3-step process on how to do that. Now, the reason why I'm covering that in this program is because one of the number one memory complaints people have is, how do you remember people's names? You meet somebody and you get their name, and then seconds later the name just disappears out of your mind. Or if it's not a short-term issue, it's a long-term issue. You're walking around your neighborhood, or you're at the store or at the gym, and somebody taps you on your shoulder. You turn around and you see somebody you recognize, but for the life of you, you do not remember who that person is. And what makes it worse is when that person has the audacity, the nerve to remember your name. And so we're going to build on the last episode where we talked about MOM, and I'm going to give you another acronym, and it's called PIE, that remembering names is as easy as pie. I'm going to go through this really quickly because it's very simple and straightforward, and you're going to be able to learn this rather quickly and apply it towards remembering names and faces. Because if there's one business skill, networking skill to master, it's your ability to recall people's names. And really it comes down to focus. It comes down to focus. So in the previous episode, we talked about how observation is key, how being present with somebody, but how do you hone that focus on the person's face and on their name? Well, the PIE. So you want to write this down so you will remember it well. The P stands for place. And what's going to happen here is this is something you could do right before you meet somebody, before you even have words with them and you're meeting somebody for the first time. You could look at them and notice that there's a place on their body or on their face or something that they wear that just pops for you, and it grabs your focus. Right? This is a focus and concentration program. So where does your focus go on that person? And there's usually one outstanding trait, something that's either temporary or permanent, meaning something that they're wearing, a piece of jewelry, maybe their tie, maybe their makeup, or something a little bit more permanent, like a facial feature, their eyes, maybe a specific color that grabs your focus, or maybe it's their nose or their lips. So where your focus goes, energy flows. So what I want you to do is next time you're at an event or you're meeting new individuals, maybe you're at a wedding, maybe you're at a business cocktail gathering, you see somebody and you know you're going to be introduced or you want to meet them, look at them from across the room and pick their place. And how this came about was, I remember visiting California for the first time, and I was on the piers years ago, and I noticed that there were these artists that were there, and they were doing these caricature drawings or these portrait drawings of some of the tourists. And one woman in particular, one artist, was just more popular than the others. And I always believe that genius leaves clues, that if somebody is doing something spectacular and gets the attention and focus of other people, then there's a reason why. And so I don't have the kind of I'm not trained in art, but I was asking her as she was packing up, I asked her, why do you think you're so popular here? What is it about your art or about yourself that so many people are interested? To sum up what she said, she was saying that she really appreciates the difference in everybody. How a lot of people are trying to fit in, but she thinks that it's their difference, it's what's outstanding that makes them beautiful. So what she really tries to accentuate are those differences. So it stuck in my mind where everybody has something that's a unique, there's something that stands out, and I call it their place. So the P in PIE, P-I-E, stands for place. And really, the reason why this technique works is because it forces your focus. Remember, we want to sharpen your concentration, sharpen your powers of observation. So I want you to look at the person and pick one feature, and that's going to be their place. So for example, if you meet somebody and they have really long blonde ponytails, And then that's, well, all of a sudden that could be Miss Ponytail or Miss Blonde Ponytail. If you meet somebody and he has very blue eyes, that's Mr. Blue Eyes. Or maybe you meet somebody and they have a shaved head, that's Mr. Smooth, for example, right? You accentuate in your mind. You're not saying this to the person. It's only in your mind. Or maybe somebody has some gold earrings, that would be Miss Gold Earrings. And then so you're labeling the place. That's the first step. Now, the I in PI stands for imagine. Imagine. Now, what does that mean? What I want you to do is when they tell you their name, I want you to listen to it, and I want you to imagine their name as a picture. What could be a reminder for you, an image that reminds you of their name? So a lot of people, for example, they forget someone's name, and then they start going through the alphabet. Does it start with an A? Does it start with a B? Does it start with a C? And they get really nervous when you get to like W, right? Because there's not many more letters after that. But sometimes it works. Sometimes knowing, like you go with E, oh, it's Elliot, right? Or F, it's Farah, right? It reminds you. And so, but imagine if you had something that sounded just like the person's name or reminded you of the person's name. So, for example, you meet somebody named Bob, and when I think of Bob, I imagine apples. Why? Because bobbing for apples. And so if somebody's name is Mary, I always think of a lamb. Why? Because Mary had a what? A little lamb. If I meet someone named David, I imagine a slingshot. Why? David and Goliath, right? And using a slingshot. And so somebody's name could be John, and I think of a tennis racket for John McEnroe. And so you'll find that with a lot of names, you could come up with a close picture. You can imagine a picture that almost sounds like it. Doesn't have to be exactly, but it's close enough your true memory could recall it. Because your true memory knows the difference. You just need a prompt. You need to be able to overcome, when I'm talking about focus, what I call the 6-second syndrome. 6-second syndrome. When somebody gives you their name, you have about 6 seconds to do something with that name. Otherwise, it just disappears into the ether. And by imagining it, it forces your focus on the person's name. And so that's really why it works. So you have to really listen for the name. And then when you're listening for it, the act of trying to turn it into an image helps you to really have this awareness around it, and you make it personal, and you put more energy and concentration into it. So even when this technique doesn't work, it still works. Why? Because it gets you to focus on the person, the place, right? And it gets you to focus and really listen to the name. And so what do you do when you have the name turned into a picture? All you do is the next step, the last step, which is the E in PI, which stands for entwine. Entwine. Now, what does it mean to entwine something? It means to tie together, right? And so what are you tying together? Very simple. The P and the I. You're taking the place and the image, and you're entwining those two things together. You're like putting them together like sticky glue. An example is you meet somebody and they have, let's say they have gold ponytail. They have a gold ponytail, and that's Miss Gold Ponytail. And then all of a sudden her name is Mary. And so you turn it into an image. Mary had a little lamb, right? So you have a lamb. A lamb always represents Mary. And then the entwining could be, oh, a lamb is there and eating the gold ponytail. And you're thinking, that's so childish. That would never happen. Who are the fastest learners? Children, right? They use their imagination. They use their creativity. They use emotion. And so that's why it becomes memorable. Because the problem is when most people forget someone's name, they have nowhere to go. But at least when this works, it still works because you're like, oh, what was that person? Oh, that person has the smooth head, his Mr. Smooth. What was going on with their head? Oh, I was bouncing a tennis racket off of his head. What's his name? Oh, it's John, because tennis racket reminds me of John McEnroe. And so you have it all there. So even when you forget someone's name, where most people have nowhere to go, here you go, oh, what was their place? It was their smooth head. What was going on? It was a tennis racket. What's his name? John. Let's do another example here. Let's say you meet somebody. This gentleman has a mustache, right? Then that's Mr. Mustache. And maybe it's a gray mustache, so it's Mr. Gray Mustache. So that's the place. And then he tells you his name. He tells you his name is David. David. And we already have an image for David, right? We have a slingshot. So the entwining is combining the gray mustache with what? the slingshot. So what are you doing when you're meeting David and he tells you the name? You're taking a slingshot and you're hitting what? His mustache. So next time you say goodbye to him, maybe 30 minutes later after you leave the gathering, the party, the networking event, you're like, oh, who is that? That was Mr. Gray Mustache. What was going on? I was hitting him with a slingshot. What's his name? David. And here's the best part about this. Your true memory knows the difference, but this is only a means to an end. What do I mean by that? It's a means to an end because it helps you to focus. Remember, this is the Quick Focus Blueprint program. How do you sharpen your focus? How do you maintain and sustain your concentration when you need to learn something brand new? For example, names. And so it gets you to focus on that aspect of their face, maybe. Maybe it's a feature. We call it their place. If it's gray mustache, you go there. And then what's entwined there? Oh, it's the image of the slingshot. And that means the person's name is David. But here's the magic part of it. Even when it doesn't work, it still works because it gets you to focus again on the person and themselves, right? The face, and it gets you to focus on the name. The place is focusing on the face and the imagination is focusing on the name. So even if you can't come up with a perfect image, you're more likely to remember just because you have better focus. Just like when people read, they have a better focus, using the techniques that we talk about because the focus leads to the comprehension. The focus leads to the memory. And so that's really the magic. And here's the best part. Eventually, the images disappear because they are a means to an end. Meaning, once you know the person's name, the picture disappears because it was just a way of capturing the information and focusing over that first 6 seconds. And so you meet somebody, and once it becomes part of your long-term memory, the images just disappear. But it was a means to an end to get you to focus, to get you to remember, get you to learn something brand new. In this case, it's names. So what I want you to do is I want you to put in the comments how you're able to use this. I want you to practice this. The next 10 people you meet, I want you to practice picking a place. And you don't have to do everything here. I just want you to just look around and just as you meet new individuals, practice looking at their face and picking a place. If you're going through a magazine, if you're online, if you're watching television on Netflix, I want you to just look at people and say, oh, that's Mr. White Teeth, great white teeth. Oh, that's Miss Golden Amulet. That is person there has the mohawk, right? And you pick a place. Practice picking places. And then what I want you to do, number 2, is I want you to write down all the names of the people that you meet this coming week. And I want you to practice imagining their name turned into a picture. T-I-P, turn into picture. And practice taking their names and turn into a picture. And if you want to get really, really intelligent about it, you could actually go online for your specific country where you live and find out what the top 10 male names and the top 10 female names are in your country, and then practice with those. Because if you practice with the most used names, then you're going to have more of these names. It's kind of like a little Rosetta Stone for remembering names. It's like a directory you have, because now we went over a number of examples and you'll always have images for those. If you go through and a person's name is Carol, imagine somebody Christmas caroling. You meet somebody named Mike, imagine them singing karaoke on a microphone, right? If you meet somebody and their name is Susan, imagine a lazy Susan. And again, whatever you come up with is going to be better than anything I come up with because it's personal and relevant to you. If you meet somebody named Judy, I use red ruby slippers. Why? Because Judy Garland, right? The Wizard of Oz. And so that's what I use for that. And so you could use famous people and practice either using the person themselves or maybe something that represents that person. So for example, I don't associate someone named John to John McEnroe. I associate to a tennis racket. And I always use that tennis racket for John. I don't use a tennis racket for somebody like Jimmy Connors, right? It's always tennis racket for John. And for James, I use jam, for instance. For Jim, I used dumbbells, right? Because you're going to the gym. So what I want you to do, again, is in the comments section, I'd like you to just put your name there and also turn it into a picture. So put your name and some names of people that you meet this week, and then put the translation or the image there and practice that. So go around, practice picking places on people, practice imagining people's names, and then finally, once you get comfortable with that, then try entwining those two things together. And it's a really easy, simple way to remember names, almost as easy as pie.